What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tattoo Critiques. We've got something special for you today, as we've got an apprentice-only episode. We've had a ton of submissions and several comments saying that we should have an apprentice-only episode. So here we are. We heard you loud and clear. So let's see what we can do to help you out. Alright, first up we have Mark Biddle out of Derry, Ireland, and Mark has been an apprentice for about 7 months. And Mark, you sent in this little colored flower on a hand that looks pretty solid overall. There are a couple spots near the top of the tattoo that I would like to talk about, mainly that big black area above those outlines. It just seems like that's a bit harsh and you could have done something different entirely in that area. Whether that be a softer shade or adding more leaves, right now it's just really separating those old tattoos from this tattoo. You could bring some of that shading up into the old tattoo and make it background to the old tattoo that's already there. What I would have done is add some leaves in there as well to kind of help bring it up into that older tattoo. The color itself I think is fantastic, and you've got great saturation. The little yellow inside of the flower looks good, along with those little white highlights. I do think you could use some work on the leaves that are going down on the knuckles. There are a couple spots of the outline that just aren't complete, but my main gripe about those leaves on the knuckles are just the color and saturation overall. The leaves themselves almost look like maple leaves, and I'm not a huge fan of the lines running through them either. You need some sort of variation in there to really sell that it's an organic leaf. I probably would have tried to avoid those knuckles as much as possible, just because that's the spot that is not going to heal very good. A lot of that color is going to come out no matter how good you put that tattoo in. I think the two black lines that are swooping down from the right side are also doing this tattoo no good. They don't really need to be there. Another thing I'd like to bring up is the photo of the tattoo itself. You have some purple stencil lines going down on the knuckles, and I know that stuff can be very hard to wipe away sometimes. This is one of those times that you could actually use some alcohol or spray stuff and put it on a paper towel to really get rid of that purple. You might get some of it on the tattoo, and that's okay. It's only going to burn a little bit. The alcohol is there to help clean up any leftover residue, all the green ink that's down on the knuckles. Maybe have them wash their hands really well. You want this to be as good of a photo as possible, because this is what you're marketing to your potential clients. So overall, I think this tattoo itself is very solid as far as the technical application goes. When it comes to the red, when it comes to the orangey colors, and even the white highlights, I think that stuff is in there. But again, I'm just not a huge fan of the leaves themselves, the design of the leaves, and the way they stick on the knuckles, as well as the solid black on the top portion of this tattoo. So thank you so much, Mark, for sending that in. All right, next up we've got Joel from Hamburg, Germany, and Joel says he's been tattooing for about 5 or 6 months. Joel, you sent us this cute little pig with wings hanging from a cloud. The first thing I noticed is this line hanging down from the cloud to the pig that's not super clean, and this would be considered a leading line. This is going to lead the viewer's eyes from the top of the tattoo down to the bottom, and your eyes are going to be following this line. So that line in particular has to be as clean as possible. It almost seems like there's lack of confidence in your lines altogether. As we come down from that line into the pig, we see a lot of the same lines happening here. And some parts of the pig, down by his leg and foot, we see the line kind of disappeared altogether. So to me, this kind of just seems like lack of confidence. That could be remedied by starting out with a very clean stencil and following that stencil to a T. Just being aware of how your client is positioned can dramatically change your stencil. Sometimes when we're stretching the skin, the stencil likes to take weird curves, but if we just follow that stencil, when we let go of the skin and the skin snaps back, everything should be nice and straight. Bringing our eyes back up to the top of the tattoo, it seems like the cloud isn't super soft and it's rather stippled in. I have seen artwork like this, clouds in specific, that have been stippled in, but they still have a soft appearance. This does not quite have that, and this is an area that I probably would have used a mag shader. It just would have given us a softer effect, and you could have used that stipple work elsewhere in the tattoo just to give you some nice contrast of texture. I do like the effect that the pig's far right leg has, how there's not any outline on there, and it just seems kind of softer than the other legs, giving it the appearance that it's sitting behind everything else. Overall, I think this is an okay tattoo and a cool concept, but I probably would focus more on traditional palm-sized tattoos at this point in your career. But thank you so much, Joel, for sending that in. All right, next up we've got Ashley Thomas from Wales. And Ashley, you mentioned you've been tattooing for about 3 months, and you sent in this little Jason mask on a hand. This is a prime example of what apprentices at your skill level should be focusing on. I'm not saying that because this is a forgiving tattoo. I'm saying that because this is not an easy tattoo to accomplish. You see every error in traditional tattoos like this one, and that's a great thing for apprentices, so you know what to fix. All right, let's start with the rose. The rose itself is okay. I think you could have went with a different choice of red. This red just kind of has a lighter orangier tone to it that doesn't work super well with the yellows and greens that are happening as well. I think if you would have chose to use a slightly darker, more bold red, it just would have made the yellow seem a lot more bright. There's a portion in the center of the rose that seems to go back behind the yellow part, when in reality that should be the very middle of the rose and that should be sitting in front of that yellow part. The outline that you have around the rose is okay. I do wish it were a bit bigger to stand apart from the Jason mask. And there are a couple spots on the rose outline as well that just don't fully connect, on that leftmost petal to be specific. In traditional tattooing, there is a rule of thirds, and the rule of thirds generally goes a third black, a third color, and a third skin tone. I see you maybe used that rule in a couple parts of this tattoo, but I don't think that you understand how that rule is applied as a whole. If we were to just focus in on this rose needs to be completed with solid black first, covering a third of every portion, and then a third of that red, and then leave a third of that skin tone. And then we copy that technique and put it everywhere, all over the petals, all over Jason's mask, all over the other flower as well. That is a true traditional tattoo. When we move over to Jason's mask, I think you went a bit heavy on those shades that are running into the nose, because it seems like that nose is really huge, when in fact Jason's mask is a lot more shallow than that. It's a lot more smooth around that nose area. One would say it looks like a men's protective cup. There are parts in the black eyes as well that just aren't fully black. There's a little bit of skin tone left over, and that is an area where I would put solid 100% black. The shape of his eyes also seem off. It seems like one is a bit more rounded than the other. The one on the right seems a little more oval. I think you kind of overdid it with the gray wash shades in the hockey mask, and I think you need to be a little bit more controlled on where those black shades go. Get down that foundation first, keep in mind the rule of thirds, and I think that your tattoos will excel over a short amount of time. But thank you so much, Ashley, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo sent in is from Jake Wilkes. Jake, you didn't mention how long you've been an apprentice for, but you did mention that this is your 10th tattoo. Ever. So Jake, I really like the design and concept overall with this tattoo. I think it's really neat. I do feel like it's missing a little bit of line weight up at the top, especially when we've got these nice thick lines at the bottom. I know a lot of those lines are being covered by shades, but you have a little bit of lines exposed that's in the handle that I feel like would benefit from just being a bit beefier. Hey, where's the beef? I'm also not a huge fan of the shading that's happening around the screws in the handle. It kind of just seems like there are hills going around there. I do like the contrast of solid blacks that are happening in the blade of the knife compared to the skin tone that's left on the outside of the knife. I don't think the shades that are happening in the blade of the knife are super smooth, but the way that you decided to shade these on the inside of the blade actually gives these petals some real dimension. So a simple critique for a fairly simple tattoo. Thank you so much, Jake, for sending that in. All right, the next tattoo is sent in from John Adams. And John, you mentioned you've been tattooing since about February 2020. So John, you sent us this necktie with a tongue tattoo. To be honest, this tattoo kind of looks like it was colored in with crayons. So Crayola John, where do we start? The first thing I want to point out or ask about is this blue background. I'm not sure what's going on with the blue in the background. The knife is going in skin, so I'm not sure why there's sky in the background. I'm sure it would really hurt to get stabbed by that dagger. I do find it funny how the knife blade starts very thin but ends up a lot thicker. This does seem like a very small dagger as well. It seems like this is the handle of a sword but the blade of a butter knife. Yeah, still don't know about that blue background. There are some weird things happening with the shades around the red parts as well. The red parts are supposed to be the inside of the leg, the blood, if you will. Those aren't even blown out lines on the outside of the red, those are actually shades, so I'm not sure what the shading is doing there. Those shades I probably would have put on the inside of the red. The shading is kind of haphazard around the whole entire thing. You know, consistency is what you want to aim for. You want to keep your hand movement the same throughout the entire thing. So if you were to start on the left-hand side of this handle of the hilt, you would use a consistent motion with your hand and work those shades up, and then move your way over to the right, keeping those same movements with your hand. That way those shades are consistent throughout this entire tattoo. Even at the very top of this tattoo, obviously that line is not even whatsoever. It's got a hell of an angle. As we work our way down to the brown part of the handle, there is no real contrast happening here. You know, you could have left some skin tone or just a lighter shade of brown, but that brown just seems very flat. And as we move our way to the bottom, the gray shades that are happening in the blade just seem very messy as well. There's really no consistency happening. The line that's running down the middle of the blade starts off to the left and moves its way to the right, so the bladesmith should be fired. All of this being said, I would go back to square one and focus on your designs on paper before you put them on skin. The designs need to be watertight before you apply them to skin. Whether it's on yourself or somebody else, the design is the foundation of the tattoo, so you need to have these as clean as you possibly can before making a stencil. And if your design looks bad on paper, abort! Abort! But thank you, John, for sending this in and letting me talk about it. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's critiques. But before we go, we got to talk about my favorite tattoo of the episode, which was sent in from Jake Wilkes. Jake, I went with your tattoo this week because as far as technical application goes, this one kind of sat above all the rest we've seen. From the solid black in the blade to the shading in the handle, this tattoo really shows you took your time and worked on consistency. There are a couple small hiccups here and there, but this being an Apprentice episode, that's to be expected. But thank you, Jake, once again for sending that in. So that's going to lead us into our featured artist of the week, which is Russell Van Schack. You can find him on Instagram as Find Your Smile. Russell specializes in very bright and vivid Disney and anime tattoos, which is fitting because you can find him in Orlando, Florida. Dude knows his clientele. He has a very unique style, mixing heavy line weights with a very beautiful watercolor technique, and he does it extraordinarily well. It's just something you really have to see for yourself. And I honestly think he's very underrated. So make sure you stop by his page, check out his work, give him a follow, and let him know I sent you. All right, so that's gonna wrap it up for this episode, but before you guys go, please make sure to subscribe. You're already here, you've made it this far. Just click the button right here, because you know you're gonna wanna see next week's video too. All right guys, thanks for sticking around. See you next time.